G'day, mate.
How are you?
Good, mate.
First of all, I've got 3 questions, a little bit more personal.
Yeah, go deep.
Not full. It's gonna get deep, I think.
Initially in the early stages wanting to make money, but then once I made money I still felt completely empty, and there was a massive void. And then I thought it was going to be the ultimate relationship, and then I got into what I thought was a great relationship, and after a while I realised that still wasn't the thing either. And there came a time where I started to realise motivation it's not an outside job, it's actually an inside job, just like happiness. And the things that really motivated me for a long time, once I made those 2 discoveries, were really just helping people. Like, I really love to help people. And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but I got to a point in my life where, I built a number of successful businesses. I got out of one business arrangement. I had a lot of money in the bank, and I took about 2 years off, and I did nothing. And I just, I traveled the world, I partied, I had a lot of fun with my friends, and then I got to the point where I'd almost spent all of my liquid money, and I was getting to the point where I had to start liquidating assets if I was going to continue to have that type of lifestyle. So I was like, well, I'm ready to go back now, but what am I going to do? And I sat down and I thought, well, because I'd made money before, and I was very good at making money, but I always found I'd get to a point where I'd make a lot of money, but then I'd just get bored because I was looking for something, and when I didn't find it, no matter how much money I had in my bank account, I just didn't feel any more fulfilled. And so when I made this decision, I made a very conscious decision that when I came back, I was going to do something I really loved. And so I literally sat on the beach. It was Bunga Beach in Sydney, and I sat down with a journal. I started, writing down like all the things that I'd done in my life that had really fulfilled me. And I started looking back at my life, like what were the things that I did that when I did it, I'd lose time and space. What are the things that I would think about on a regular basis? What were the conversations that, I really enjoyed most about when I really got into them? And I discovered that the conversations that I enjoyed the most, the things that I would fantasize, the things that I read about was all around human performance, human psychology, human development. And I realised it was born from this insecurity as a small kid who just had a lot of problems, and just wanted to feel normal. And my life is a pattern of searching and seeking and trying to find ways to develop myself to be less afraid, be less anxious, and be less. It was almost like I realised in the pursuit of trying to be normal that it's not normal that I wanted. I just wanted to be able to feel better. I wanted to be happier. I wanted to feel more fulfilled. And then along came my son, and that was about 5 years ago now. And as soon as my son was born, and again, it's getting a little bit extrinsic again, but it almost amplified this desire to help people to now, oh my God, I've got this little being, and this little being is going to be my ultimate legacy. Because, you can leave behind money, you can leave behind a business, but those things, they're, in essence, they're material, in a way. And I have this immaterial legacy that is biological in nature that really can, do almost anything that he wants to if he is set up the right way. And so for me, I get the opportunity now to really be the parent that I think every child has always wanted, or I know that I always wanted. Not that I had bad parents. I didn't. My parents did the best they could with what they had at the time. But I really feel this incredible responsibility in knowing that, when I leave, he will, basically be what is left behind. And it's not just him, it's all kids. What we will leave behind is the next generation, and how we equip that generation will determine, the outcome, not just of our species, but potentially for the planet as well. And I'm really conscious of how cliche this sounds, but it's just something that drives me at a very high level to set the best possible example for this guy, and do the best I can to work on me, so that I can pass him down as much wisdom as possible. There's an old saying, pass down wisdom, not wounds. And my goal is to pass down as much wisdom as I can to, potentially give the next generation the best shot.
So what would you like your son to remember of you?
Ooh, that's a big question. Look,
maybe 3, not qualities, but 3, I would say qualities. 3 things that
someone who was fun.
Yeah, okay. Someone
who he respected, and someone who who loved him for who he was. I don't think there's anything more you could ask for, which is have to be able to have fun, to be respected, and to be able to experience a real and genuine life. And that's the thing about kids, mate. Have you got kids?
Yeah.
Okay. Really? How many? Just one? One girl. Well, you probably know this, but I don't want to assume anything. Like, I never really knew what unconditional love was until I had a child. And then as soon as this little being came in the world, it's no matter how much he pushes my buttons, I still just love him unconditionally. There's nothing he can do that will make him think otherwise.
Yeah.
And that, to me, it's the purest experience I've had to date on this planet. There's nothing more pure.
So going back to business, because you talked about you made a lot of money before in the business, and then for 2 years you had fun, and then you come back to build this business, what is the quality that you have that makes it what it is now? Like, what's maybe 2 or 3 top qualities that you have that you
good
see
question.
in yourself that?
I think the first one is just the pursuit of excellence, and it's to contextualize that. It's like I just have a really high standard for everything in my life, and that's not to say that I don't make mistakes. And it's not to say that there aren't certain areas in my life that I have standards that are perhaps lower than other people's, but I just have really high standards. And so for me, having really high standards has helped me from a performance perspective, because I'm always expecting the very best out of myself, and I'm always pushing myself to have the very best, but I'm also expecting that from others. I expect that from my team, but I also expect that from my clients. Because if I'm going to work with a client, whether it be an individual or a business, I expect a level of performance. I expect their commitment to mean something. I expect their promise to mean something. Because if someone makes a commitment and they don't follow through, then that in itself is a waste of not just their time, but my time. And I have a huge, which would be the second one, I have a massive value on time. And so as a result, I treat time very differently than everyone else. You probably know from the scheduling that you've had to go through in order to get this appointment. I have a very high value on time. All of my appointments are pretty much back to back. I often, work through lunch, and it's not that I don't enjoy it, but I just have such limited amount of time available now that I have a son, because I actually I dedicate an immense amount of my time to him. And so that makes me so much more productive and protective of the time that I have. And so as a result, when you have a huge value on time, you really invest it in a very careful way. It's like money. Most people don't have a high value on money, and so they're very carefree and careless with it. And I was like that in the early stages as well. But once I started to develop a genuine value for money, not just a concept of, I really like money, like a value for it, and you start to realize the effort that goes into making $1. When I was almost flat broke, I had, a cupboard full of suits. I was the ultimate pretender. I wanted to be successful. I wasn't quite there yet. I was making a bit of money, but I had a cupboard full of suits, beautiful fancy car, and I had all the bling, but I was completely miserable. And now, I walk around for the most part in board shorts and a t-shirt and a pair of thongs. Sure, now I drive a nice car, but there was about 10 years there where I had plenty of money, but I drove an old beat up car, because my value around money had changed. It had gone from the value of money to being able to be able to spend it and acquire material items with it, to now actually value it, to be able to do things that are actually really meaningful and productive with it.
Do you think that changed when you had your son?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It had already started, but once he came in, it really shifted it. And the third quality would be resilience. I am, people say to me, how are you going? Like my response, every time someone, because that's, I always look for the things that we can do on a regular basis to set our psychology up to really allow us to do the things that we want. And just answering that question, how are you? How many times a day do people ask you, how are you? It could be anywhere between 10 to 50 to 100 times a day. And that to me is the perfect opportunity to add a suggestion that we can use to program our minds to encourage us to perform at a very high level of performance. And so every time someone says to me, how are you? I always answer with, I'm unstoppable. And that to me comes out in the way that I do business, it comes out in the way that I parent, it comes out in the way that I do relationships. The thing that I'm not very good at is I'm not very good at quitting. I have the ability to deal with pain. I have the ability to deal with pressure. I have the ability to deal with anxiety, because I've learned how to develop the skills that not make those things insignificant. It just makes them easier to deal with, so that I can dive into situations and circumstances that most people would be afraid of because of the stress, because of the pressure, because of the anxiety. Now, most people wouldn't swim to the bottom of the ocean and stay there for 10 minutes without a tank on, because they don't have the equipment. But when you've got the right equipment, you can go to any depth that you want, as long as you've got the right training. And so for me, that's what life is like. In life, you can put yourself into any situation and scenario as long as you've got the right training and the right equipment. And so for me, the right equipment around resilience is knowing how to regulate emotion, knowing how to balance your psychology out when things happen. Because most of the time when something bad happens, that's all people see is the bad. They don't see the duality of life. Now, every situation in life is meaningless until we apply a label to it. And we are actually in control of that. And that to me is one of the most important aspects of being not just an entrepreneur, but being a successful parent, just being a happy person, is being able to look at every scenario in life, whether it be good or bad, but to see both sides. Because if something bad happens, oftentimes something bad will happen in someone's life, and they'll think it's the worst thing that could have possibly happened to them. Until 3 years later, they look back on that event and they start to see the series of connections and go, hindsight. That was actually, if that hadn't happened, all these other things would have happened and I wouldn't be where I am now. So that bad thing actually wasn't a bad thing at all. Whereas for me, I honestly believe through my own experience and the experience I have with my clients, you can get yourself to a point when bad things happen, you can actually introduce hindsight within a matter of seconds, just by focusing on the right thing and asking the right question. Because whatever we focus on will expand. And if we have an experience that we label in that moment as bad, it will expand and we'll see all the badness in it, all the misdeeds in it. But if something bad, and we go, our immediate response is, oh, that is bad, but then our response from that is, okay, so what's the benefit of this? And most people, that's just, I just pressed a button. So when most people experience something that is bad, their first response is to focus on what's bad about this. Whereas one of the things I encourage with the people that I work with is when something happens and your first instinct is bad, train yourself in that moment to go, okay, hang on a second, I've just labelled this as being bad, but what's the benefit of this? How is this experience serving me? What skills, knowledge, or experience am I gaining today as a result of this experience that's going to make me better, stronger, faster than I was yesterday? And when you can start to do that instinctively, and you start to practice and you do that, it becomes a routine that you practice consistently. You do that for about 60 odd days. All of a sudden, it's no longer something that you have to try to practice to do. It's automatic, and it becomes an autonomous behaviour. And then every situation, by virtue of just the way that you've trained your brain, is able to balance itself out. The same is true for when something good happens. Because now I train myself when something good happens, rather than get all elated. Because when we're elated, that's when things can go wrong as well. Emotion is central to any form of chaos. When there's emotion in the stock market, what happens to the money in the stock market? It flees. When there's emotion in the property market, what happens to it? It flees. Money is looking for a safe place, and emotions aren't safe. They're unpredictable. And so one of our goals is, in order to be happy, we've got to create this realm of a level of predictability in a very unpredictable and uncertain world. And the way that we do that is by looking at both sides of every situation and scenario in the moments that they happen.
So I've got a good following question for emotions. So yourself, how do you deal with negative thought comments in your mind? Because you wouldn't need to be pretty positive all the time. So when that comes in your mind and you're feeling down, how do you get out of it pretty fast?
Honestly, the cure for everything is consciousness. And so, I practice consciousness on a regular basis. And so as a result, when a negative thought pops into my mind, most of the time I can recognise it the moment it comes in. And so when I recognise it the moment it comes in, the first thing I'll do is go, whoa, hang on, where's that coming from? And I'll balance it out. Okay, what's the benefit of this? How is this thought serving me right now? Again, it's making me more conscious. But then I just reframe it and I start inputting the program or the code or the command that I want. Our brains are biological computers, meaning that every thought that we have, every word that we say, it becomes a suggestion, and that suggestion becomes self-hypnotic. And that self-hypnosis becomes self-fulfilling prophecies. And so if we're not careful, if we leave negative thoughts unchecked, it's not that I don't have negative thoughts, I do. I just catch myself when I do it, and I reframe it, and I repattern it as quickly as I possibly can. But it doesn't mean that I don't have bad days. It's like, you can go to the gym every day for a year, and at the end of every day for a year, you're going to be in the habit of going to the gym. But if you stop going to the gym, all that work that you've done for the last 12 months, that's slowly going to start to deteriorate. And within about 1 to 2 weeks to 3 weeks of not going to the gym, you're going to find yourself not wanting to go to the gym anymore. And it's gone from being a compulsive behaviour where you want to go to the gym because it's become programmatic, to now it's like, I haven't been to the gym for a couple of weeks, I could probably go for a couple more days without it. The same is true for meditation. The same is the practice for consciousness, but the same is also true for the way that we think and the thoughts that we have. Whatever we allow to permeate our mind will become habitual in nature, which will become compulsive, which ultimately becomes automatic behaviours. And I think automatic behaviours are amazing because that's where life becomes effortless. Life becomes effortless when we program ourselves to do the things that we don't have to think about. They just happen naturally. But most people have programmed themselves to do the wrong things, and so as a result, they're constantly experiencing resistance to the moment that they're having because they're doing the things that they don't want, not realising, either consciously or unconsciously, that they've programmed their mind to do exactly what they're doing in that moment themselves.
So how would you deal with, your best advice to deal with excuses or to not start, let's say, going to the gym, someone that always putting it off? What would be your best advice to deal with?
Look, mine's probably a little bit controversial. I think every situation is different depending on the individual and their emotional stability and their own psychology and, their worldview. For me personally, I respond really well to discomfort. I respond really well to tension. And so when there's something that I want to work on, I will look at all of the negative aspects of whatever that behaviour is producing in my life right now, because that creates discomfort. But you go, well, hang on, didn't you just say you want to... I'm saying I want to look at both sides because we might be allowing, or tolerating certain behaviours because there is no discomfort. We're not looking at both sides. We're numbing ourselves to the consequence of that behaviour because the behaviour itself is providing more dopamine and more of a pleasure from the brain or the neuro response than the actual physical consequences of what we're doing. And so for me, whenever I want to create any change, I actually start to delve into the negative aspects of the behavior, and I create a level of tension. But then on the flip side of that, I start looking at the behaviors that I want to display. And then I literally start creating statements in my own mind that I repeat on a regular basis that will suggest me to do that behavior. I remember after I had a stroke, I really struggled with memory. And so I came up and I used to catch myself going, oh, my memory is so bad. Oh, I'm terrible with names. You say that 50 times a day, you say that 50 times a week, that becomes a suggestion that you hang on to. I do this exercise in one of my programs where I go through this about a 45-minute period, and over that 45-minute period, I suggest to everyone in that room, with a click of the fingers, I say, everyone in this room will wake up at 4:30 a.m. And I say that command maybe about 30 to 40 times at the most. What's interesting, I do that over a 35, 45-minute period, and about somewhere between 50 to 70% of that room will wake up somewhere around 4:30 the next morning. And I use that as a really powerful example of, okay, I'm consciously making you aware of what I just did to you. I suggested to you, 40 times that you're going to wake up at 4:30 a.m. and look what happened to 70% of the room. Imagine what the thoughts you're thinking every day are doing, because you're not just thinking about them 40 times a day, you're thinking about them hundreds of times a day. But the question is, are you conscious? Have you turned the light of consciousness on to become aware of the thoughts that are running through your mind so that you can start correlating between, okay, now I understand why I'm getting these results. Because most people have these results and I go, I don't understand why I keep doing this behavior. Start examining your thoughts. Our thoughts are literally the root. They're the foundation of our psychology. And it's not until we switch the lights on and we start shining the light of consciousness onto our thoughts that we become aware of and why these behaviors keep taking place. Every behavior is a result of some form of a suggestion that's been embedded. And in most cases, it wasn't even yours. It was given to you by a parent, by a sibling, by a co-worker, or even, in some cases, a teacher. But it's time to take the power back. Take the power back and start becoming conscious of your own behaviours that are derived from a thought process. And own the thoughts, because you can reprogram them in a second.
All right. I've got a pretty good question for you now. If you can think about it while I just change this quickly. Do you think that someone that's grew up for example, myself, I was pretty undisciplined and stuff like that. Well, it's not a good example because I've changed. But let's say someone that's grew up in a very bad environment, that's grown with behaviors that's really the lowest that you could have. Do you think that the person can completely change behaviors with going within themselves? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the beautiful thing about the human experience is, the beautiful thing about today is there's always tomorrow. And with the gift of tomorrow, we can always change. The question is, it always comes down to motives. And motives really revolve around our values. And there's I don't know how many stories there are of people in the market where people have, they've grown up in a really, there's this one story, I think it could even be a fable, but it's about these two brothers who grow up in a really rough environment. Their father's an alcoholic, their mother's a drug addict, and they both grow up in this environment. And one of the children goes on to be, a hardened criminal, a drug addict and alcoholic themselves. And when interviewed, he was asked in the interview, why do you think you turned out this way? And he said, well, is it any wonder? Look at my parents. And then they interview the other brother. The brother becomes a very successful, stockbroker or real estate investor. And they sit him down and interviewed him and said, so I'm just curious, how is it that you turned out this way? And he said, well, is it any wonder based on the upbringing that I had? Two people can have the same upbringing but come out completely different depending on what level of responsibility they take for their own minds. We've got this incredible understanding of the human brain now around neuroplasticity, which means the brain has this incredible ability at almost any age to completely repattern itself with the right suggestions, with the right behaviours. You can teach an old dog new tricks. We now understand this. But what we also understand is the brain works on a default mode network, meaning once you reach about 27 years of age, you have a preset set of neurons that fire on a regular basis, and that becomes the default mode network. That becomes your worldview. That becomes not only how you view the world, but most of your automatic behaviours. And it, in most cases, takes a severe disruption of the default mode network for people to look at the world differently. And that could come in the case of a child being born. That can come in the case of some form of mortality. But it requires some level of a gestalt, some level of an experience that shocks you into looking at things differently. And then when you start to look at things differently, the brain starts to behave differently. Now, the synapses start to move from certain neurons to other neurons. And before you know it, you've got neurons that were firing on a regular basis that may have caused things like anxiety, stress, and depression. And they're now linking to other neurons that create things like happiness, fulfillment, and joy. And again, it's all a matter of how much responsibility we take for our own minds and our own thinking and our thought processes and the environments that we create, not just within our own worlds, but also internally as well.
That is a fucking good answer. So you talked about ADHD a lot, and you just talked about a little bit of depression, so I'll go into that direction. These days, why do you think there's so many people diagnosed and mistakenly diagnosed with ADHD or even bipolarity?
Yep.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
Look, it's interesting when you look at ADHD, when you look at bipolar, when you look at Asperger's, when you look at even autism. And I've got members of my family that I've got one that's got autism, another one's got Asperger's. I've got ADHD myself. I've got dyslexia myself. And there's a certain school of thought that looks at these things as not necessarily negative labels. They're in some cases evolutions of our psychology. Now, there's extreme aspects of that as well. When you look at things like ADHD, ADHD for the most part, has been incredibly. There's been a huge correlation between ADHD and screen exposure. So the more screen time people have, the harder it is for people to actually concentrate. And so I think the reason we're seeing more things like ADHD right now is that there's perhaps a genetic composition of that as well being passed down as character traits, but also we've never been exposed to more screens than we have now. I remember once upon a time, like when I was a kid, we got to watch the TV maybe for, a couple hours the day here and there because it was set in one place in the house and you can only access it at certain times of the day. Now we can access video anywhere on the go. You've got 8-year-old kids with mobile phones that have access to YouTube, and they're not just watching TV at home after school, from 3:30 till 4:30. They're now watching, TV on the way to school. They're watching TV on the way home. They're now watching TV at the breaks. They're now watching TV on Facebook. They're now watching TV when they're watching Snapchat or Instagram. They're on the screen constantly, and as a result, the brain evolves to that kind of an environment, which in some cases produces, aspects of ADD and ADHD behaviours. But again, when you look at ADD and ADHD behaviours, they're in themselves lies certain benefits when viewed the right way. There is extreme perspectives of this, and there is extreme expressions of ADHD that might be considered very unhealthy because the individual themselves hasn't learned how to regulate, the emotions and the neurology and the biology that comes along, with things like ADHD, because people who have ADHD are often prone to things like anxiety and stress as well. And so, if you have ADHD but you don't have the equipment or the tools to learn how to regulate stress and anxiety, that ADHD experience might not necessarily be a positive one. But one of the things, which was the case for me, but one of the things that I've learned, I've learned how to actually make the most of ADHD because yes, I experience high levels of stress. Yes, I experience high levels of debilitating anxiety, but then I started to develop the tools that enable me to regulate the stress, regulate the emotion, and then now as a consequence, I'm able to use the behaviours that ADHD produce, which is in most cases a level of hyperactivity for me. So I have enormous amounts of energy. But what I've also learned about ADHD is it's created a hypersensitivity to boredom for me. And that's how I describe ADHD. ADHD is a hypersensitivity to boredom. And when it comes out most is in kids who are exposed to stimulus that they don't give a royal shit about. And as a result, they'll be looking at everything else but because they're not interested. And all that is a symptom of interest. If they're not interested, they're not going to concentrate. If I'm not interested, good fucking luck trying to keep my attention for more than 30 seconds. Whereas when I'm interested in something, I can focus on something for 3 or 4 hours at a time without even taking a breath or drinking any water or even going to the toilet. But it's only if I'm interested in it. And so as a result, not only do I have higher levels of energy that I can deploy, whether it be as a parent, as a friend, but especially as an entrepreneur, but I also have this ability to focus on these things for extended periods of time and be very conscious as a result of my ease and distractibility of the things that I should be working on and the things that I shouldn't be working on. Because, as an entrepreneur, you work out pretty quickly. There are some things you're really good at, some things you're really interested in, and there's some things that you're not. Focus on the things that you're good at. Focus on the things that you're interested in. And learn how to develop your skills and talents enough to be able to generate the revenue that's required to be able to outsource the rest. And then you have freedom. You can focus on what you love.
Yeah, you kind of answered the next question, which was, is ADHD real, or is that everything that's around us, like moving faster?
Combination. Look, I think is ADHD real? To me, it's a label. Everyone just behaves differently. Some people just like to use labels because it helps them understand either themselves or others, or it gives them something they can hang their hat on. For me, we're just all unique in our own ways. Everyone's personality, everyone's behaviours, a fingerprint almost in expression. You know, the way I express my ADHD is going to be different the way someone else expresses their ADHD. But when it is compounded by the fact that, yeah, we are living in a faster-paced world. We are living in a more connected world. We are living in a world where people can be connected far more, you know, readily and easily and quickly than ever before in the history of the world. And as a result, that's going to affect attention spans, especially even in situations where you've got people that are doing things that they love. You know, they're totally, you know, focusing on something they love that completely fulfills them, that they're interested in, but all of a sudden they start having these ding, 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 ding notifications coming up. And even in an environment like that, when you train yourself to respond to every distraction, even in situations where you can focus on things that you're interested in, you can actually train yourself to unfocus, to be unfocused, and then you've got real issues. You know, I think the biggest issues is learning how to disconnect. You know, people talk about the power of connection. I think connection is very important, but I think disconnection is just as much important as connection, because it's not until we can disconnect, you know, especially from the technology around the world, that we can fully connect with what's in here. You know, technology for the most part is symptomatic of it's an expression, you know, whereas what's most important isn't symptomatic, it's what's in our core. You know, what is the true reason behind what it is that we want to do in life. And the more we connect with our truth, the more we connect with the values that are important to us, man, the easier life is. The easier it is to be able to deal with stuff when we know what's important to us. And people say, oh, it's really tough making money. It's actually not really tough making money. Okay, but you just haven't connected the dots to work out that if you make more money, you can have more fulfillment in the areas that are really important to you. Because once you make that connection, then you'll be able to work it out. It's just not important enough. When something is important enough, you'll work it out. Until it is, you won't. You know, and then you start to, then you have the next evolution of consciousness, which is, and Jim Carrey summed it up the best. He goes, I wish everyone could make all the money and have all the fame that they'd have ever wanted. Because then they'll realize that's not what life is all about. That's what it took for me. You know, I grew up without money, so I had this understanding that voids breed values. Once I make money, then I'll be happy. I made money, millions of bucks, and then I was like, but I'm still not fucking happy. Okay, I know what's missing. It's the house on the water. Got the house on the water. It was great for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden I woke up one morning. I was like, I'm still fucking miserable. I know what I'm missing. I'm missing a fucking convertible Porsche, maybe 2 convertible sports cars. That'll make me feel better. Bought 2 convertible. I felt great for a month. But then a month later I woke up and I was like, I'm still fucking miserable. And then it was a girlfriend. You know, I went and dated a gorgeous model, a couple gorgeous models, but then I realized I was still just fucking miserable. You know, happiness in itself is what we're all pursuing, and it's an inside job. But what's interesting is when you pursue the things that are important to you, when you actually discover happiness, and you know, there's a lot of studies that have been released around positive psychology in the happiness study, and what we understand about happiness is people who are happy are 78% more likely to be successful in whatever they pursue in their life. But most people are pursuing things in life in order to be happy, and they're going, well, I'll be happy once I get where I want to go. And that's just not how it works. We've got to learn how to be happy first.
Why is that most people, common people, think that it's hard to make money and that they'll be happy when they get more things?
Because that's the society that we've been brought up in. We've been brought up in a society that doesn't teach us how to make or manage money. You know, we've been brought up in a society that's based on the industrial complex that makes factory workers, you know. And what was the second part of your story, of your question? Why is it so hard to make money?
Yeah.
And why is it so hard to be?
They feel like it's...
They need to consume because that's what they see. You know, they see. It's the Hollywood phenomena. You know, they see the movies, and now it's then it was the reality TV phenomena, and now it's the social media phenomena. You know, we live in this world where we see this constant consumption, and we just assume, wow, that dude's rich, he looks happy, he's got a fucking sports car and a beautiful wife, and you know, all these suits and 50 different watches. Well, that must be the key. And it's just not. But for most people, they either get to the point in their life where they never actually truly make it to work it out. Like most people go to their grave not being happy and never having worked it out. Never realizing that, oh, geez, I never made that money, so I never got the opportunity to be happy. And they never got the opportunity to make the money to realize, shit, it's actually not about the money in the first place. And I know how trite that sounds. I know how cliche that sounds. But the reality is, the reason that most people have such a high value on money is because it's a void. They don't have money, and so they value the things that they don't have. And the reason people put such a high value on cars and clothes and material objects and consumption, because it's a void in their life and they don't have it. And they just assume by looking at the insta-perfect world that the people out there who do have it are happy. And in most cases, they're not. Some of the most miserable people I've met are some of the most successful people you would know. And they're fucking miserable. And some of the most unhappy people that I've met, are some of the most glamorous people on Instagram. It's just the image that they portray, but they haven't worked it out yet. And everyone's on their own journey. It's not mine to judge anyone else's journey. The only journey that I can judge, and even if I'm worthy of judging that, is my own. You know, at the end of the day, we've got to accept our own reality and work it out for ourselves.
So going to social media and parenting. So social media is probably the greatest tool that's ever been invented to grow a business or to grow your own profile. Why is it, and that depression is on the rise because of social media? Why is that? Why is it seen as such a negative thing, like in the media and by most people, when really, is it used the wrong way? Or
I think if you look at Theodore Roosevelt was way ahead of his time. You know, a great quote he said was, "Comparison is the thief of joy." You know, when you look at social media and, you know, the increase in, you know, mental health issues and, you know, the other issues that it's creating socially, oftentimes it's coming about as a result of comparison. People are comparing themselves to others who they think are more happy than them, but they're looking at material aspects of their life. They're looking at, you know, how they look on the outside. You know, how pretty are they? How good is their body? What type of a bikini or board shorts are they wearing? What kind of car are they driving? What kind of house are they in? You know, where do they go on holidays? And that's where I think for most people, social media, it's just amplifying what was already there. We were already comparing ourselves to other people, but now we can just do it a lot easier than what we could do it, you know, previously. Once upon a time, we had to wait until the newspaper came out, or we had to wait until Woman's Weekly came out or we had to wait until we watched a certain TV program in order to be able to compare ourselves and feel miserable. Now we can feel miserable from the moment we wake up because we just pull our phone out from under our pillow and we start looking at Instagram, and there's a million, or there are a thousand reasons in our feed to feel miserable because he's better looking than me, she's better looking than me, he's got a better body than me, they're wearing nicer clothes than me. Woe is me. So I don't think social media is the issue. I just think social media has created a much greater level of access to the ability for us to compare us to the things that we want that we don't have, that, you know, subsequently can create, you know, levels of unhappiness.
And I don't know if you heard about the world's toughest man, David Goggins.
Yeah, we had him speak for us last year in LA.
Awesome. So
yeah.
You mentioned in an interview that it says that we live in an extremely weak society. Do you agree, and why?
No, I don't agree. I think you could focus on certain aspects of our society that could make you believe that we're living in a very weak society, but I honestly believe that we're living in a society that is slowly becoming more conscious, slowly waking up, slowly becoming more aware. And it's almost like there's this third wave of consciousness that is coming through right now where people are starting to wake up quickly. And I honestly believe because we have to. I think there's an actual requirement for us to become more conscious. You know, you're seeing yoga has never been more popular. Meditation has never been more popular. Spirituality has never been more popular. You know, personal development has never been more popular. And that, to me, they're all indicators of society or subsets of society that want to experience more. Not necessarily just for the sake of having more, but for the sake of experiencing more happiness, experiencing more joy, and experiencing more fulfillment. But I honestly think it's a necessity, because if we don't wake up soon... Now, I interviewed David Suzuki last year or the year before in Vancouver, and that was one of the, like, if you're sensitive to depression or the world's going to end, don't watch that interview, because he basically laid on the line. We are heading towards, the sixth major extinction event. The world's going to be fine. The world will recover. You know, the polar ice caps will come back. Okay, the magnetic field will eventually balance itself out. But as a species, we may be creating an environment that we will not be able to be able to survive in. But ultimately, the world will recover. The world's fine. You know, everyone's about, we've got to save the world. Don't worry about the world. The world will recover. It's us, unless we annihilate it with nuclear weapons. But then still, 65 million years from now, the world will ultimately recover again, and then there'll be the next evolution of biology that comes through from there. But if we don't start getting our shit together from a global perspective of looking after the world so that we as a species can actually survive, then we're in big fucking trouble. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, and I'm not a climate change fucking advocate or activist, but I am conscious of the fact that we've done an enormous amount of damage to this planet, and the consequences of that are far and wide.
So you brought this up, and that's something that I believe that is true too. Everything that's going on right now. Have you seen the Gillette ad? Have you?
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. So I've got a whole paragraph to tell you, but you understand a little bit what the ad is. So do you believe that feminism? I don't want to cause any type of answer that's going to be
controversial. Yeah.
But it's something that I'm quite aware that is going a little bit too far. Like taking masculinity away from our primal kind of need as a male. So what are your thoughts on the ad?
I've only seen the ad once.
Yeah.
And look, I thought it was an interesting take. I think there's a lot of focus on toxic masculinity. There's a lot of focus on feminism. But, you know, to me, we're just all human beings. You know, and whether it's toxic femininity or toxic masculinity, there's levels of behaviour that just aren't healthy. And whether we label it as toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, look, to me, that's just, it's symptomatic of behaviour. I think what we've really got to look at is the underlying cause, which, yeah, that's just not a realm that I'm really, yeah, I don't think I've watched the ad enough to really give a solid perspective on that answer.
What are the most valuable life lessons you've learned throughout your journey?
You can make more money, but you can't make more time. Again, cliche, but it's not until it's not until you have the thread of time taken away until you realise how important it is, you know. It's not until you have an important relationship that's taken away, you know, abruptly that you realise how important certain relationships are. You know, it's not until we, you know, have certain people die that we realise the importance of life. And so for me, the value of time, it's just been key above everything else, because we can't make it back. And there's every possibility on your way home tonight that you could get sideswiped by a truck and you may not make it home to your family. There's every possibility today that something drastic, God forbid, could happen to, you know, your daughter or your wife when you get home. And it's not until, for some people, until those moments happen, until they start to realise all the time that they have wasted in the lead up to that loss. And so for me, and I've been exposed to near death on more than half a dozen occasions now, and so as a result, I view time completely differently. And I was saying this to someone who interviewed me recently. You know, I have a high respect for time, but I have a high level of flexibility for where I invest it. And what I mean by that is, you know, in the mornings, I will often run late with my son, and I've copped a little bit of flack for this because people say that's rude and disrespectful. My son is 5, first and foremost, okay? So he's going to kindergarten. And yes, he's in an impressionable age, but I also, when I wake up in the morning and he wants to sit down and play for an extra 5 minutes on the couch, or if he wants to cuddle for an extra 10 minutes in bed, which means we're going to be a few minutes late for school, I'm going to choose the cuddles. I'm going to choose the play, because I know based on my own experience, I may not come home today. There's every possibility he may not come home today. And I would hate to get to the end of that day and have something tragic happen and then think back to that thought or multiple thoughts where he said, Daddy, I just want to play for a little bit longer, and I didn't do it. You know, are you going to be thinking, oh, well, I'm so glad I got him to fucking school on time? You know, you'd be thinking, fuck school. Why did I even take him to school in the first place? I wish he didn't go to school. I wish I didn't even work. I wish I'd stayed home every day and just played with him.
Got shivers a little bit in that answer. That's good. What is the message that you want to pass on to the world? If so that was your son.
Yeah.
So it's kind of different. If, let's say, your employees talk about you in 15 years, or no, more than that.
Yeah.
50 years, what would you want them to remember of you?
That I impacted their life in a way that changed the course of their history. Like, I just want to make a difference, mate. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm very blessed. I get 1 or 2 messages a month from people whose lives that I've saved. You know, people who are literally getting onto Facebook, who are getting on to write their suicide note, getting on there to make their final goodbyes. You know, they've got their pills ready, they've got their razor blade ready, they know where they're going to go, they're at the cliff, they're ready to go, right? And they see a video when they get onto Facebook to basically do their finalities and do their note. And that video changes their perspective, and they put the pills down, they step away from the edge, they take a step back and they go, shit, maybe life is actually worth living, maybe I can give it another shot. And you know, when you start getting those messages, even if you only get one, you know, because if most people got one of those messages in their life as a result of the impact, that will change the course of your history, because you just won't think the same. You know, and I get at least one of those a month now, and as a result of that, I just don't take for granted what I have. And it was Spider-Man's granddad who said, with great power comes great responsibility. But I'm no different from anyone else out there. We all have the power to affect people. Just to fucking smile, bro. Just by smiling at someone, you could save their life, because they could be walking through life thinking, nobody likes them, everyone hates them, every time I look at someone, no one will even look at me. But if you make genuine eye contact, when you give them just a beautiful smile, that could be the very thing that makes them go, wow, there is people out there that do have love. There are people out there that do care. You know, I think the greatest thing that I could give people is the gift of just being a better person than you were yesterday. You know, pay it forward. We live in an exciting time. We have such incredible potential. Every single one of us has the power. You know, once upon a time, you needed to have access to a TV, a network license millions of dollars equipment in order to be heard. Now, as long as you've got a mobile phone and an internet connection, you can broadcast any message that you want. And it might be your message that impacts the way someone parents their child, impacts the way someone leads as a leader in their business, impacts the way that they work with their pet, impacts the way they live their lives. And that's the stuff that juices me out. That has the stuff that changed the world.
What are 3 beliefs of truth that you wish everyone would live by, and why?
Number 1, anything's possible. Number 2, everything is your responsibility. And what I mean by that, everything you have created everything in your world, regardless of whatever or however it's shown up. It is there to serve you at the highest level, to give you the lessons that you need. You see, most people they set a goal. And I remember one time I set a goal when I was, I think I was about 34 at the time. I just set a goal going, you know what, I want to be a billionaire by the time I'm 65. And 2 weeks later, I had a class action put against me as a result of something my business partner had done. Not something I had done, something my business partner had done. And 4 months later, I'd invested almost $1 million in legals after tax, which is a lot of money. And I get to this point where I'm like, why is this happening to me? Why me? And I was like, no responsibility whatsoever, because it wasn't my fault, right? But it was my responsibility to deal with it. But I wasn't dealing with it because I was blaming him, because it was he did this, he brought this in. And then I sat down, I was like, why is this happening? And then it hit me, I was like, well, do you remember when you set the intention to be a billionaire? And I was like, I remember this conversation, I was like, you're like, what the hell's that got to do with it? So, well, what kind of knowledge do you think you need to have if at some point you're going to be worth $1 billion in assets? Well, you're going to need some understanding of commercial law. And what you're doing right now is you're getting a very expensive education in commercial law. You asked for this experience. You just couldn't see it because you're playing in the now game. And I'm all about being in the now. But when it comes to perspective, our higher self has a perspective that's running decades ahead of us. And I couldn't see the game. Okay, all I was seeing was the move. And as a result, I saw a move that looked like checkmate. But what it was setting me up to be able to dominate the board. And I didn't realize at the time. The moment I made that correlation, that realization, the lawsuit disappeared. Like literally, it just evaporated. It was dropped, okay? Never pursued again. Even the lawyers like, we don't understand. They've just stopped pursuing it. This is after we'd spent an enormous amount of money. But what was interesting, once I took responsibility that it was my creation, not his, it evaporated because I got the lesson. And so I think the second greatest thing that we can take away, the second most important trait is responsibility. And the third is, time. Value it, because you can't make more. You've only got a certain amount and you don't know when your clock is up. And when it is, I guarantee you, you'll be like that 3-year-old who wants another lolly. Just one more lolly, please. And you ain't gonna get it.
That's crazy. Your answers just like keep flowing. The question that I wrote, and it's insane. You quoted Jim Carrey before, and there's an interview where he says, "There is no me, there is no us, only energies." Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I believe in that, but do you believe we have the power to literally become anything we want if we put our mind to it? If
Absolutely.
we always
anything.
repeat ourselves.
Anything. And I'll even go further than that. We are, there's scripture says, God made us in his own image. Everything right now, I have this fundamental belief that everything I see is an expression of myself. And I'm either going to embrace it and accept it or resist it and judge it. And like every personality that shows up in your world, I have this fundamental belief that they are just an expression of you in some way, shape or form. Because we're all energy. Okay, we're all just in different cups. But if you go to the ocean, you've got the ocean, right? It's the ocean. But if I was to take that ocean and put it into a cup and then set that cup back in the ocean, what's in the cup? It's still the ocean. Yeah. It's just in the cup. And we're all cups, right? But all our cups are different shapes and sizes, which gives different expression of energy. But ultimately, we're all the same ocean. And we're all just different expressions of ourselves. And I think the greatest challenge that we have is judgment, right? Because we judge expression and we judge each other's cups. We think, oh no, that cup's wrong. No, oh, that cup's better. That cup's worse. That cup's right. That cup's wrong. Well, I don't like black cups. I don't like white cups, right? And as a result, it's not until we can embrace all cups that we actually experience the highest level of joy, because then there's no resistance. When there's no judgment, there's no resistance. When there's total acceptance, you have joy because you're not fighting anymore. Most people don't experience happiness because they're too busy fighting what is. The moment you put the weapons down and you start to embrace and accept what is, there's no need to fight anymore. You can actually experience a full level of joy. And I honestly believe the reason that most people don't like themselves is because they're too busy not liking the other people that are ultimately and their own expression. I don't like this person. That is you. I don't like that person. They're you. They're just expressing you in a different form. We're all the fucking ocean. It's just wrapped up in different cups. And the sooner we can get to the realization that, you know, it's just we're all just, you know, we're all just, we're all $5 in a jar. Now, if you were to break us down at a molecular level, you know, from carbon and oxygen and water, we're all $5 in a jar. We're all exactly the same. We're just put together a little bit differently. But that's the game. And the game is remembering what we forgot. Remembering we are the ocean. Because the moment you remember the ocean, which I still struggle with on a day-to-day basis, all the resistance stops, all the pain stops. Or I should say, the suffering stops. The pain will always be present in some way, shape or form, but we don't have to suffer anymore. Suffering is a choice. Pain is present. Suffering is optional.
You will know a little bit about Joe Dispenza?
Yeah, a little bit.
So what we just talked about, that's not a conversation that's appealing to the general public. You know,
I think that's changing. I think more people, I'm observing that more people are becoming more open to conversations around energy. You know, because it's not too far from the fundamentals. And even when you look at the law of thermodynamics, energy isn't created or destroyed, it's just constantly changing form. Mm-hmm. And every person is just a different form of energy, but it's the same energy. You know, it's just how we define and how we label that energy that gives it meaning at a psychological level so that we can interpret it and make sense of it. Now, we're meaning creatures. We're constantly searching for meaning. But in our hurry for meaning, we often judge things quickly in order to give it a label so that we can move on. You go, yep, I understand that now I can move on. You know, it's not until you have like I've had experiences in meditation where I've had breakthroughs, where I've seen stuff and I've burst into laughter because I've literally thought to myself, okay, I now see, I've gone through realms, you know, I've achieved a level of expansion and white light where I've gone, holy shit. And then I burst into laughter because the thought is, how the fuck do you explain that? It's inexplicable. You know, and that's the challenge. We live in this fixed world that is based on a psychology that is constantly trying to allocate a meaning to determine a reference so it can keep moving and creating meaning for new things. And, you know, it's fair to say that everything is meaningless. We choose the meanings we give. And it's not until we choose the meanings we give that we create a meaning. But ultimately, everything is meaningless until we give it a meaning. And that's the game. How can we get to that point where we can look at everything and see whatever we need to see in order to give us whatever we need to get, whatever we need in order to get that next level? You know, Eckhart Tolle said it great. He said, you know, whatever moment you're experiencing right now is the exact moment that you need for the further expansion of your consciousness. How do you know that is the moment you need? Because that is the one you're experiencing in this moment right now. You know, start treating every moment as what it's meant to be, as an experience that is designed to give you a perspective, a skill, a knowledge, you know, that is by design there to evolve you to the next level. Because if you keep fighting evolution, you keep fighting lesson, you're not going to evolve. That's like being in a computer game, you know, and getting up to Donkey Kong and him constantly squashing you, and constantly squashing you, and constantly squashing you, and constantly squashing you, and you don't learn how to just move forward, move back. He puts his leg down, picks it up, and you move. It's not until you learn how to navigate that last obstacle that you think of bonus round. You know what I mean? And everyone's searching for the bonus round, but they're too busy making the same mistake and not learning the lesson that's required in order to, you know, successfully achieve the completion of the round that they're in so that they can get to the next round, so that they can get to the bonus round and then realize there's just a consecutive session of bonus rounds layered upon layered. And it's just one after the other after the other. And sometimes we go back. You know, sometimes we and we have to go back to the start, and that's okay. And we just move our way through. But it's that's almost the depressing part of it is with every layer that you peel back, you realize, oh fuck, what do I have? It's another layer. With every code, you know, I often believe that our psychology is like a 7-digit code. And in order for us to achieve the next level of thought, next level of expression, next level of potential, you've got to work out the code of your psychology. You've got to work out how to get those tumblers together. And the moment you work it out, you bing, and you press the button and the door opens, and guess what's inside? Another code. And now you've got to sit there and work out the next 7-digit code. And you have all these experiences that help you, and then you work it out, you open that safe, guess what's inside? Another fucking code. And that's life. But it's if we resist that and go, oh no, another code. God, when does it end? Then you experience suffering. Whereas if you can approach it with a level of curiosity, ooh, another code. I wonder what this one's going to be like. I wonder, you know, is this one going to be alpha? Is this one going to be numeric? Maybe this one's going to be in hieroglyphics. What is the pursuit of these codes going to teach me in this round? Then you experience joy. Then you experience fulfillment. Then you experience, you know, this basic level of raw curiosity that children have that we lose. that makes their lives so easy to be fun. It's so easy to have fun and so easy to be happy when you're a kid because you're not carrying all that baggage.
Kids are the best.
They're awesome, man.
The best, man.
They teach us how to live.
What type of meditation do you do?
I started with Vipassana, and now I do Transcendental Meditation. Well, I do Vedic meditation, but it's the same as TM.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn TM. I don't know.
It's beautiful. It takes practice. In order to have breakthroughs where you see, it takes years to really understand.
All right, one last one. Questions. What is your idea of a perfect world? Kerwin's world.
Perfect world is an imperfect world that people embrace for the lessons that are required for them to create what they believe is a perfect world. Perfection to me is embracing imperfection. There's no such thing as perfect. Well, the only thing that is perfect is imperfection, because we live in an imperfect world. We live in a dual world. There is no one side. And I think once we can grasp that, then we have real hope. But it's in the pursuit of perfection that we, focus on our flaws. It's in the pursuit of perfection that we compare ourselves to those who have more than, less than, better than, more than, and we allow ourselves to either feel better because we have more than, or worse because we have less than. And that to me is just another form of suffering, because even if you think you're better than someone else, that's suffering. You just haven't worked it out yet. Because sooner or later you're going to find someone who you perceive as being better than you, and then you're going to feel suffering. And the reason you feel suffering is because when you felt like you were better than that other person, you were looking at them as being lower than you. And as a result, you were judging them as being less than you. And then when you see someone as being higher than you, you then look at yourself, how you look at that other person, which is less than. And that's how we experience lower levels of self-worth, is by judging others as being lower than us. Because then when we judge someone as having a higher level of worth than us, we then look at ourselves based on how we look at others. I used to be a personal trainer. And there was two types of clients that I would work with. Typically 95% of my clients were females who wanted to lose weight. And personality A would come in, and she would get onto I'd design her a program, and I'd get her on the stepper to warm up, just about to take her through her first workout, second workout, whatever. And a beautiful girl would come walking in the gym, and she would look at her and she'd go, she'd come in hot pants, and these are the days where chicks actually wore hot pants and a G-string to the gym. In the olden days, bouncing in, little half top, boob tube, and their personality A would look at her and go, "Oh my God, look at her! She looks like a tramp. What a slut! I can't believe she's wearing that. She must be she's got to be bulimic. Is she bulimic or anorexic? She must be fucking everyone. She's got to be the town bike, right?" And I'd sit there hearing this, going, "She's actually really quite nice." This venom would be coming out, and I'd be like, "Wow, that's incredible." And then you'd have personality B would come in. Personality B would come in. Same scenario, overweight, wanting to lose weight, wanting to get the bikini body for summer. I'd take her through, write her a program, put her on the stepper to warm her up, and the beautiful girl would walk in the gym. And she would look at her and she'd go, "Oh my God, she's gorgeous. She looks like an angel. She's floating in. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine. Do you reckon that you could introduce me? If I could have a friend like that, that'd be amazing. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Now, I didn't really see much difference apart from one hated seeing skinny, beautiful women, and one really liked seeing beautiful, skinny women, until it was about 3 months down the track. Personality A, she would come in at around the 8-week mark, normally sooner, somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks, right? At this stage, she's normally lost somewhere between 4 and 5 kilos. And she'd come in on a Monday after having a very successful completion of the previous week, and she'd come in on a Monday and she would look bloated, swollen, red, and guilty as sin. And I'd say, "Ooh, what happened to you on the weekend?" She'd be like, "Oh, the girls came over on Friday night, one bought, a case of wine, one bought chocolate cake, and the other one bought, a whole bunch of pizzas. And then we had ice cream. And then because I'd been so naughty on Friday night, I ended up being naughty on Saturday. And because I've been naughty on Saturday, I ended up being naughty all Sunday. And so, those 5 kilos that I've lost? Yeah. Well, I've just put back on 4.5. And be like, wow, all that work you've just done, undone so quickly. And personality B would come in. And she'd come in bouncing, same time, because normally people would self-sabotage, so between the 4 to 8 week mark, right? Yeah. Come in, "Oh my God, you wouldn't believe what happened on Friday night. The girls came over, one bought wine, one bought pizza, one bought cake. And guess what I did? What? I went and I steamed my chicken, I steamed my broccoli, and I had my steamed broccoli, and I had my steamed chicken, and I went for a walk on Saturday morning, and they had hangovers, and I went for another walk on Sunday morning, and those 5 kilos that I've lost? Yeah, it's now 6. And I'd be like, wow. And it wasn't until a decade and a half later that I started looking back and understanding this concept we call self-sabotage. See, personality A, she wanted to look like that chick, but she saw what she wanted to look like and she'd spit venom at her, like venom. And that is a level, and to a human being, we're mammals, right? The greatest threat to a human being is rejection, right? Because as mammals, we're herd animals, and when we get rejected, we become fearful, like Stripey does, the zebra, who gets kicked out of the herd in Africa because he now becomes the target for the lion, right? And so as a result, personality A would get to the point where they start losing weight, and unconsciously they're going, if you start looking like her, people are going to start talking about you the way you talk about her. So I'm going to serve you here. I'm going to encourage you to self-sabotage right now. I'm going to encourage you to eat Coke, drink Coke, encourage you to drink wine, encourage you to eat pizza and eat ice cream and cake, because you'll put that weight back on and then you'll be safe. Then you won't be in the threat of looking skinny in a bikini and having people call you a slut, having people call you an anorexic, and having people call you a bulimic. Personality B saw what she wanted, and every little thing that got her one step closer to that, her subconscious mind was going, that's awesome, that's awesome. Don't fall over now, don't fall over now. You can do it, you can do it. Because what we live in is a world of projection. We project meaning and we project our experience. Personality A was projecting, this is exactly how the world is going to see you if you appear that way. And personality B was doing exactly the same thing. The only thing is, one person was setting themselves up to win, the one person was just setting themselves up to lose. And that's how most of us live life. When we are bored, our mothers release enormous amounts of this hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin will turn any biochemically healthy woman into a loving, nurturing, nesting machine. It's Mother Nature's way to ensure that a child receives physical stimulation and touch. Because the more physical stimulation and touch that a child receives, the stronger their immune system. Okay, the stronger their brain and neural development. So the more physical and more oxytocin, the more, oh, you're beautiful, oh, you're gorgeous, oh, I want to cuddle you, breastfeeding, touching, skin on skin. The more of that, the greater the chance for survival. And what's Mother Nature's greatest goal? Evolution. Survival of the species and an evolution of the species. Okay, and if a child doesn't receive enough physical stimulus, physical touch, as we know through, there's been studies written on failure to thrive where children were taken away from their parents in concentration camps, put into baby farms where they wanted to manufacture soldiers, and a nurse would go around every 3 hours putting a bottle in their mouth, and these babies died en masse because they didn't receive the physical touch that a biochemically healthy woman would give them. They didn't receive that nurturing, that skin on skin that developed not just their immune system, because every time you squeeze a child, you're basically activating its lymphatic system. The lymphatic system becomes the basin of the immune system, and the stronger the immune system, the stronger the development of all the major organs, especially the brain. And so as a result, what we know as mammals, our greatest fear when we are born is that our mother won't accept us. That's the greatest form of rejection. But we don't forget that. We travel through life thinking, if someone rejects me, it's still attached to this concept at a primal level of death. Because as a child, we know, not consciously, unconsciously, if we're not accepted by our mother, we're dead. We're going to be lion food. And so as a result, our number one desire when we are born primally, unconsciously, is acceptance through our maternal parent, right? Because if we don't, we die. But then as we start to grow and develop, we don't lose that connection to acceptance, and we keep seeking acceptance in other forms and relationships. And that's why so many people fail in business, because sales is such a crucial aspect of entrepreneurialism. And sales is literally putting yourself in the firing line for the perception of primal death in every interaction. Because every interaction you have in a sales environment is literally a little primal death. Because if someone says no to you, that's the equivalent of rejection. That's a little primal death. That's why so many people are afraid of sales. They're not afraid of rejection, they're afraid of that little primal death. Because that's what we're afraid of, that damage, that death that we'll receive as a result of the rejection. If you can disassociate, if you can condition yourself not to be, not to require external levels of acceptance in order for you to be fulfilled, if you can understand that as long as you accept self, you, for who you are, and for most of us, as long as we have certain people around us that can accept us as well, not necessary, then that's all we need. We can pursue anything that we want. We have unlimited potential and we become unstoppable.